Okay, so now we're going to move on to this A3 idea and just cover this in a little bit of detail. So we then fully prepared, and you have a choice of which way you'd like to play this exciting bishop f4 line. So the first game I thought I'd pick is a game I played against Mickey Adams. Probably doesn't need much introduction. Great player. And this was played in the Bunratty Open 2012. Now the Bunratty Open is maybe not such a serious tournament, as it's played in adjoining to a bar in Ireland, and most people go there for really a holiday more than anything else. Again, I'm making my excuses before we go on to my appalling moves. So I thought in this position here, I didn't really know the in and out details of whether E3 or A3 is the way to play, and I thought I'd try A3 in this game. In hindsight, I think if I play Mickey again, I'd always play E3, because it seems to me that White is in little danger of losing after E3, as long as you play carefully. So that would be my choice from now on. In this game, A3 was played. And now, just to really talk about options available here, well, if C5, we transpose back into the main variation we considered at the start of this DVD, with D takes C5, and this should be very comfortable for White. You know, Bishop takes C5, E3, Queen C2 ideas, and Castle Queenside ideas, and this is very comfortable. Now, Knight BD7, as I mentioned before, is actually a mistake. This is what A3 is aimed against, this move, because you can then play Knight to B5. And C7 is a threat. Bishop B4 check is no longer available, and after Knight to E8 you can go E3, and you simply get a nice small advantage in this position with simple moves. The knight comes back to C3 if it's kicked away, so C6, Knight C3, and we have just the kind of position we should be comfortable playing. So we don't need to study this too much. So what other options does Black have? Well, without a doubt, the only real serious move against this variation is B6. And the point being now, if we do our same thing at some point, if we take on D5, well, Black can take with a knight, but also take with a pawn in some positions, and the move A3 has not helped White's position as much as the move E3. Still playable option, but it's not really going for the maximum from the position. Now, this is really the first time I've come across this line when I played it, and I didn't play maybe the best variation, but it was a very interesting game. So let's just see how things develop. So B6, good move. Queen C2. This is a logical, as we know, continuation in this position. I'm not worried about my opponent capturing on E4. We should also point out this line. I mean, Black has tried capture on E4 in this type of position, when E3 again is a very solid approach, just trying to recapture the pawn. But E4 is much more testing for Black's position, when Bishop takes C4 is going to be very hard to stop, and this leads to a promising position. So B6, Queen C2, and now C5. And I don't think my next move is the best move, but we got a very interesting game. I now played E3, just trying to hold the centre together and potentially castle queenside in some positions. Now, there's been a couple of games played in this, and there was a game between Adriakin and Kramnik in this position, where Black now took on D4. In the game, Mickey played the simple Bishop B7. Now, I think also it's a fairly even position after C takes D4, and you should recapture with the knight. I think if you recapture with a pawn on D4, you could be getting a worse position quite quickly after pawn takes C4. Bishop takes C4 and Bishop B7, and one of the problems here is your knight on F3. Black is often threatening to destroy your pawns with Bishop takes F3, so I don't think this is a good line to go for. I think you have to play knight takes D4, and again Adrakian versus Kramnik continued. Bishop B7, Rook D1, Knight BD7, C takes D5, E5, Knight C6. And actually, around here, I think it's clear to see that White was doing very well, and Black's opening has been rather dubious. Bishop takes, Knight takes, and here, well, yeah, I think it's clear to see that white should be extremely comfortable, and he's clearly better. So where did Kramnik go wrong in that line? Well, I think the move e5 was a mistake. So after c takes d5, I think knight takes d5 is a better option. But even after this move, white should have some kind of small edge after simply taking on d5 and developing the bishop to b5. And white's pieces are much better placed, the rook, the bishop, and the bishop here. So maybe Mickey's idea of e3, bishop b7 was more accurate. And I think this is a better way to play. And of course here, now we've got a decision to make, because my opponent may well be threatening to now capture one of my pawns, and I'm running out of useful moves to play. A way I could have tried to keep the position together would have been rook d1. And then if my opponent ever captures, I can capture on d4, for example, and pawn takes pawn, knight takes d4. Instead I went for d takes c5, most aggressive idea, and after b takes c5 I castled queenside. So I thought, well, this is a good way to play against one of the best players in the world. And I mean, to be honest, I think rook d1 here would be slightly better for white. So this whole line is still very playable for white, and just to simply develop bishop e2, castles kingside, but black's very solid. After castles queenside, my opponent sensibly developed knight b d7, and I went for the attack with h4. So we've seen this idea before. Queen b6, and my opponent aims for a counterattack on the queen side. Knight g5, here we come. So we're going in with our pieces. My opponent now played a good move, d4. And he has to counterattack in the centre of the board. Now, here I should probably have played knight to a4. But I got carried away with an interesting idea. I mean, I took on d4 first, and then went knight to a4, which, after queen c6, led to some crazy complications. My whole idea was to sacrifice a rook takes d4, but in hindsight I don't think this is really the right way to play. And if I was going to recommend this variation to you in the future, I'd say you should, instead of castling queenside in this line, you should have gone rook d1. But let's see how my strong opponent took advantage of this. e5, and now I took on d7. And I thought my attack was going to be very strong here. Knight takes d7, runs into queen takes h7, checkmate. So he has to go queen takes d7, and now bishop takes e5, with the threat of bishop takes knight, queen takes h7, checkmate. My opponent maybe made a mistake here. But I think if he goes g6, we played a theoretic plan we've been looking at in previous games of h5. And this could give us some kind of dangerous attack. Instead, my opponent played rook on f to d8. And I don't know, I mean, I suddenly realised now that if I took on f6 and took on h7, that his king is actually fairly safe after king f8. And I didn't like the look of this position, so maybe it's not such a big mistake for him, but it still seems quite risky to play it this way. His counterplay against my king is very strong, and I probably have to end up retreating my queen. So it's a good move, rook on f d8, very good follow-up. But my position quickly went downhill. Bishop e2, now g6 to stop all my threats. And, well, I went for a tactic, but I miscalculated it. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and I fought knight to c5. Well, it was rather foolhardy. I thought I could take the bishop and go here, but after queen c7, I suddenly realised if I take the bishop here, then he's got queen f4 check, and this is the move I missed. King b1, he has rook d2, and my position starts to crumble. So really, after this position, he's got two bishops, extra exchange. I collapsed very quickly here, and the game ended. Well, he just simplified, kept his strong bishop, very good piece, and okay, I didn't bother playing on after queen c5 because he's going to take on f2. My queen side is crumbling. So that was my first, one of my first tryouts with the move a3. But if we go through the open moves again, I don't think it's a complete disaster. I mean, e3 seemed all right. If c takes d4, we play like Adrakin with knight takes d4. If bishop b7, I think a very simple solution is taking on c5 and then going rook d1. with the idea of bishop e2 and castles kingside. Rather than go for the crazy attack I went for, this would be a much simpler way to play, offering us some kind of advantage. But now let's move on to other ways you can play against this b6 idea.